that's good. I'm just giving you feedback as an email writer. I did use the city system, and it failed me.
I thought we okay, we had your
Okay,
eagle.
I'll shut up.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to call our Airpark Advisory Boarding meeting to order. So our first item on our agenda is our approval of our regular scheduled August meeting minutes. If I can get a motion to approve those.
Approve. Motion to.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and then the next one was for our special session. What was that?
I'm sorry, was there a vote?
Yeah.
It was quick.
Yeah. We all came prepared. So, and then I'll just need same thing for our special session meeting minutes. Motion to approve.
Approve.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. See that we have some citizens in the audience, so I wanted to see if anybody wanted to speak to any items that aren't on our agenda today. If you wanted to, now is the time to come on up.
Now, hold your peace.
My name is Lisa Lanza, and I've lived near the airport since 1978. I live in Montclair and Sunset. Between Keene and Hercules. And I've always enjoyed the airport. I'm in my yard all the time, and it's kind of fun looking up and imagining who's in that plane, and it doesn't bother me at all. Of course, we don't live near the helicopter pad, but that's another conversation. So, all these years I've been so busy, but I've stopped in there a couple of times and just sat on the deck and watched the planes coming in and out. And I also have sat there and had a cup of coffee or a piece of pizza or a donut. It's actually a very welcoming place, but everybody's just so busy. We go by it constantly, but I got to go on there one of these days. I've actually took my first flight without the motor. What do you call that? Glider. I took it was a birthday present, and whenever we had gliders at that airport, and it was just amazing. It was like being a bird. Came right over at sunset, came right over the beach. It was beautiful. So I know that there's been controversy, but most of us enjoy the airport, and park, I should say. And we always wanted to see it be more for us, more for involving the community. Some of the ideas were to have a playground for children with an aviation theme, have more like a camp for our children where they can learn about aviation. I'm sure you've thought of all these different ideas, but it's always been, apparently, I didn't even realize, it's just a money issue. The city just hasn't funded it, like they have funded the marina, like in downtown Clearwater, and some of the Ruth Eckerd Hall, Clearwater Marine Aquarium have been, just getting millions and millions over the many years. But the Airpark, it just sits there quietly, not getting any funding. I just got this in the mail that there's going to be a fundraiser on March 4th, 2023 for the ARC, which, by the way, I worked at U-Park back in the 80s when it was on Calumet, and we had the garden there, if you all remember that. The nursery, remember the plant nursery? Yeah. And if you can have a fundraiser there for the ARC, why can't we have some fundraisers there for the Airpark? I think, I definitely don't want to be the leader of it, but I'm sure we can find a group of homeowners and surrounding neighbors and pilots who would like to start some kind of a committee like this, and let's do some fundraising, and let's do some lobbying. Let's get some penny for Pinellas money, and just, as we know, there's a lot of money out there. We just have to ask for it. So that's what I had to say today. Thank you very much for serving.
Thanks, Lisa. Do we have anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? No? Okay, and I'm going to address what she said when we have you come up, Eric. So next we will go with our FBO verbal report, Barb. And first I just wanted to thank Barb and Dave for doing the needed preparations when we thought we were going to have a direct hit from Ian, because we all know the Airpark would have been, ground zero for being able to stage all of our emergency services. So thank you for doing the preparations needed for that ahead of time, making sure things would have been ready if we would have got the direct hit.
I think the mics need to be turned up because it's really hard
Oh, so maybe the speakers that are facing towards the audience? I don't
Well,
know.
the speakers in the ceiling,
Oh, okay.
and I've got them turned all the way up. So we're gonna get feedback. No, I don't think that microphone is on at all.
That one, could I speak again?
Oh, I can hear you.
Oh, just not real loud. But it will be recorded so other people can hear it? Yes. Okay. I didn't come all the way down here, but I'll be.
Sorry.
That's okay. She's loud.
These batteries.
All right, well, both the enclosed and the enclosed T hangers and the shade hangers continue to be in high demand. We're completely filled up, and I get emails and phone calls almost on a daily basis now. There's so many people looking for T hangers and shade hangers. Most of them are relocating from other areas of the country. They're coming to Clearwater, and they're desperate for hangers. Like I said, they're just looking for places for their airplanes. We do currently have 150 names on the waiting list, and honestly, 99% of them are for T hangers or shade hangers. And then we did have a very busy October with the weather being so great. We have had a lot of visitors from all over the country coming into Clearwater. Most of them stay 3 to 5 days, and especially over the weekends, all of our transient parking has been filled up. It's going to be filled up again today, and we have more coming this weekend, so that's been a great thing. As you mentioned, Hurricane Ian, we did take a lot of steps to prepare. We changed a lot of the tie-down ropes. A lot of the people took their airplanes elsewhere. The flight school took every one of their airplanes that didn't fit in the hangar up to Georgia. So by the FBO building, there were only 2 airplanes sitting out there. We secured everything in the shade hangars. We called tenants. They came and secured things, so nothing was going to blow around. We only had a couple of downspouts fall down, and we had a lot of tree branches from different areas in the airport that we had to clean up. But other than that, we were fine. We did lose power the second day. The first day we closed because the winds were 50 knots. There was no point in being there. The next day we had to be closed because we were without power the whole entire day. And then it came on, I think, sometime through the night. Okay, a couple things going on Saturday morning, November 12th, where there's going to be a Young Eagles rally as well as another blood drive. So I've got some of these. If anybody cares to donate blood, they'll be there with the blood bus. And then I know you guys like to know if anything goes on at the airport. We did have an incident where a stolen vehicle hit our north gate. The good news is the north gates held it. The car didn't go through, thank goodness, because we're afraid it would have hit some airplanes. But the police were right behind him. They caught him. The canine dog got him. You know, he was arrested. Took quite a few hours to sort everything out. So right now our north gate's not operational, but we still have the south gate. That's all I had. Any other questions? Yes, sir?
Did the Coast Guard contact you about possibly moving?
Well, the
They have an
Coast
agreement for
Guard,
their fuel trucks?
yes, sir, the Coast Guard did bring all their vehicles
Oh, they
over. And it was interesting, that morning at 6 a.m. in the morning, the day our power was out, he had a gate card, but then the power was out. So I got a call at 6 a.m. and then I called David, so he and I ran to the airport and opened the gate for him manually.
Yeah.
So because they wanted to start taking the trucks out. Now, we didn't think that was going to be an issue because I was also talking to sort of a command center that was sitting there with FEMA and the gentleman that brought the trucks over. And they said nobody had to be there because the pilots, if they brought a helicopter in our airport, the helicopter pilot could bring the truck over himself. So, we wanted to keep the airport secure, so we didn't open the gate. But David and I both live in the same neighborhood, and we were there in 5 minutes or so.
That's great.
So that
Thank you.
worked out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions at all?
I wanted to add a comment. I knew you, that airplane that has the note nose wheel. I know you found a place for it in the corporate hangar, and I thought that was really
Well, we
good.
put two in the corporate hangar because one of the planes that are in the corporate hangar flew up to North Carolina or Nashville or something. So that opened up a couple spots in there because he has a bigger plane. So there were two planes that we were able to put in there.
That's good initiative to do, and I don't want planes flying around in the storm hitting hangars, and I appreciate that as a tenant and as a board member, so we appreciate that.
And we did the best we could, We've been through this numerous times. I mean, I was here, David and I were both here back in 2005 when we had 4 separate hurricanes.
Right,
So we've been there, we
understand.
kind of know what to do, so.
That was a year.
That was a year, right. We got lucky that year too.
Yeah.
Because Charlie
Oh,
turned.
yeah.
Yep.
I remember a cat had kittens in the vendor's hangar. So the day that the hurricane was supposed to hit, I had to bundle those kittens up and take them to the Humane Society because we couldn't leave them there in case we were going to have a hurricane, so. Interesting things go on at the Airpark. Okay.
Thanks, Barb. All right, next, will be Eric with our director's report.
Afternoon, everybody. Eric Gandy, Marine and Aviation Director. So today I just wanted to run down sort of a list of kind of items that we've touched upon over the last couple months and just give you some updates. First and foremost, we had the fiber run completed out at the Airpark, which will allow the additions of some cameras, so additional coverage out there. So the fiber was cut some time ago during a construction project, and we finally got all that replaced. So that'll be helpful, add to the security features out there. The annual report to council, Ms. O'Donnell and I have discussed this on a couple of occasions, and we're going to do that the first part of next year. And hopefully at that time we'll have the RFP process, lease process behind us and be able to have a conversation with council about the entirety of the year and what it culminated in. I will tell you the lease negotiations are active and ongoing with Fly USA. I don't want to get into all the details of it other than to say that much of the agreement is centered around the public input that was received through these processes. So I think that's a positive that is making its way into the proposed lease agreement. At the same time, although we're working, actively, we've extended Mr. King's lease agreement for 2 months with a couple renewal options that will carry us through the end of January. And that provides time to continue the negotiations and then the options to extend for another couple months. A lot came up during this process about FAA grant funding, and I spoke anecdotally about it based on my understanding of the history of the city's reluctance to accept FAA grant funding. So last month, on the 14th, we had a meeting with the FAA and had very specific conversations on the grant assurances should we accept FAA money.
Okay.
And as suspected, grant assurance number 19 speaks specifically to the 24/7 question that frequently comes up. And it is accurate. You are to keep the Airpark open at all times, absent some kind of a safety issue that would force closure. Sinkhole on the runway, weather, something that would create that type of situation. So I wanted definitive clarity from a human being rather than trying to decipher FAA guidance, which is like reading the IRS code.
Yeah.
There's another provision in there that it's pretty interesting, and I wanted some clarity on that simply because there's been a lot of talk about limiting types or classes of aeronautical activity. So the assurance number 22 talks about economic non-discrimination. Once you pour through that a little bit, you realize that you can't discriminate against classes of aircraft. So the notion that we could say no helicopters at Clearwater Airpark, no hang gliders, powered hang gliders, no paragliders, I can't think of any others. Skydiving, that was, you can't discriminate against skydiving unless you make an argument to the FAA that these are safety issues. Clearly, I can make an argument that skydiving doesn't have a landing zone sufficient to skydive out of there, but you have to make an argument, and they have to buy that argument. So I think it's important to recognize that. So a lot of the public input over helicopters and limiting that type of activity may have been a non-starter had we accepted FAA funding in the past. And going back to open at all times, that provision would negate our ordinance restricting takeoffs and landings, and hours of takeoff and landings. So grants come with some strings attached sometimes, and these have some long-lasting ones. I even looked at Naples and the situation down there because they've been dealing with this for some time over noise. Now, Naples is a completely different animal, but they have grant funding, and what they did was a voluntary curfew for takeoffs and landings, purely voluntary. Well, it was being violated so often that they had to lock the terminal and shut off the fuel to try and curtail those curfew landings. So it was a good meeting. I appreciated the fact that we got to the bottom of a lot of these without the handbook itself is hundreds of pages long, and it was much easier to ask very specific questions related to very specific concerns that have come up through these conversations. Finally, I wanted to talk about capital funding and capital funding opportunities. The question that has come up frequently as well has to do with proper funding, adequate funding for the Airpark. And I've told everyone before that our revenues and costs are very close. They're not huge margins in this type of operation, here or elsewhere. And I looked at kind of a history of what we've done out there. We have used some penny money previously. In 2019, Hangar C, $240,000. The rehab of Hangar D, 2014 to 17 was the project timelines, $125,000. And in 2027, we have $750,000 allocated for a terminal. So that's funding sources that don't come from the general fund. The runway extension, there was some general fund dollars that went to that, a couple $100,000. And of course, you always have to speak to leveraging that funding against FDOT's contributions. So the multiplier effect is significant when you factor in the FDOT contribution. And there are also general fund potential, but that's a council city management decision. You could bond something, but again, those are decisions at the city management council level. And I think, I was talking to the finance director about this a little bit, we looked at Airpark operations and we looked at the funding across the board over many, many years. And what we haven't done, in my view, and is that we haven't accounted for the depreciation annually. So in theory, if I depreciate $100,000 a year, I should be putting $100,000 a year into reserves so that when it comes time to fix those things that have depreciated, we have the funds to do it. Yeah. We can just get by with putting $25,000 a year into reserves. So that's kind of the reality of what I speak to when I say we have some funding issues. That's not to say we can't pursue additional penny monies. We can't have conversations with our city's new grant coordinator to look at alternate funding sources and see if there are grants out there that don't have strings attached that could create conflict with our neighborhoods and our user groups. So, I'm open to all of that, and certainly will be investigating the potential for those things. And I'm open to all suggestions related to those. I'll listen to anybody that has something to say about it. But the reality is that I think we've along the way made some value judgments, and of course, revenue being an important part of being able to put money back in the reserves for the Airpark to fix things. Sometimes we've built new structures to get new revenue sources rather than fix older ones. So I think there's some decisions that we can make going forward that address some of those things and put money where it needs to go sometimes. And, the pavement is an example. I mean, I walked it not so long ago, and we definitely have some areas that we have to address. And we're prepared to do that. We have funding for that. And, we're going to move forward with that and identify those areas that are in desperate need of repair. So, I think that as an enterprise fund, the ability to, fund our everyday operational costs, we meet those needs, but when it comes to these very expensive projects, we just don't generate the revenue necessary to push back into those. But I think with some planning going forward and looking at some of these alternate sources that I mentioned, I think we may find ourselves in a better position to attack some of those long-standing projects. But we have to be forward-thinking, and we have to contemplate those projects that are in need now and in the future. So, any questions for me? I'll be glad to answer them.
Talking to people in the neighborhood, there is some confusion about the lease that is under negotiation, because they confuse it with the original landings referendum, and they think that the landings is somebody's moving on the landings down there.
Right.
I would just,
Yeah,
I'll live with them.
So I'll put it on the record, and I can speak to this. Part of that lease agreement specifically excludes
Well, I
the
know that.
landings. So, I mean, I've seen it, I've read it, it's in this proposed lease agreement.
Yeah.
That would have to go to referendum, and there's no interest in expanding into the landings.
Yeah. So, rather than a question, I guess it is a request that maybe you could make that public somewhere. The Times or something, write a small thing about, what's going on at the Clearwater Airpark to make clear that the landings are sacrosanct. They're not moving the fence, they're not tearing out the trees.
Yeah, and it's funny, I guess, that comes from the ALP or the master plan. And,
Yeah, I know.
and I think that, the city has no interest in doing that and expanding into the landings, and nor does Fly USA. So, I think we could probably at some point put that maybe on our website or something of that nature, but I can speak to it publicly, and no, it's not under consideration, it's not part of the lease agreement, and there's no proposal that incorporates the landings into the airport.
I'm confident. I spoke to Barry Shevlin about it, and he said, that's not the deal.
Yeah.
Because my fear was that the $1.5 million they put up front was a down payment to make a move on the landings.
I don't
No,
see it
I-
anywhere, and it specifically addresses it in the
Yeah.
draft lease agreement.
Yeah, okay. We're trying to organize a neighborhood Kool-Aid and donut party here over at Marymount Park, maybe, and invite the neighbors to talk about that and some other things concerning the neighborhood. So maybe we'll get it out there. I don't know when that's going to happen. It might be towards the end of November, but
Okay.
maybe that'll help.
I'll send Mike, he likes donuts.
Bring your helmet.
Do you have anything?
I don't have anything today.
If there were an ability to provide these extra hangars and shade hangar areas, where would they be put? Is there any room to actually expand and build them if there was that much demand?
Yeah, so the ALP speaks to that in some respect. And that's the challenge, is that they're limited ability unless you acquired additional property. Because, at this point, you're not crossing an active runway and to get to additional hangars if you were to put them on the west side. And there's really not enough setback over there to do anything like that. So the ALP speaks to it in a couple of different locations, but that therein becomes a challenge. And as I mentioned earlier, in the pursuit of revenue, sometimes we've built additional structures to meet the demand, but we haven't fixed some of the ones that we have. So it's been a judgment call on what the best choice is. So that one's a challenge because the demand is certainly there, and we've had those conversations. Council's had those conversations over rates. Should they be more? I find ourselves in the same boat with the marinas. We have the demand, and maybe our rate's too low. So those are all additional conversations.
And as far as community relations, has anything about the airport ever been published in recent months in the little city folder that goes out with utility bills and that sort of thing?
We haven't published anything on it.
It might be a help.
I-
It would garner, it would make it easier to garner support as you get down to the approval of the thing.
Right.
And,
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Mike.
We've been through this, every meeting, it seems like now we're getting to this. Email me and I'll get it out through social media, through public communications. So EDA events, the Young Eagles,
Yeah.
email me, I'll get it out. She just handed me this blood drive, so tomorrow I'll get that in
That's a
the
help.
city's hand and let them push that out in public communication. That's the best course of communication.
Just anecdotally, I sat on the Marina Advisory Board for St. Petersburg back in the days when there was a 2.5, 3-year waiting list, but it was free to sign up. And what corrected that was, number one, a $100 fee to sign up, and it immediately dropped to about a 6-month waiting list.
Right.
And they raised the rates, not prohibitively, but to be competitive and not be the lowest, the cheapest marina.
Sure.
So I wouldn't be afraid of approaching that here with the Airpark.
Okay, well, see,
No kidding.
I'll raise you to that I'm still not opposed to looking at FAA funding more, because I think that there's some different options that we could possibly do if they are amicable to hearing safety issues and preventing different types of flying. And, if you close the FBO and there isn't self-service fuel, then I highly doubt we're going to get the kind of traffic that they would see in Naples anyway, because they already have larger jet operations that occur down there. And I think you could work with the flight school and have them say, yeah, we're not going to do our operations outside of the 7 to 11 anyway. So I still don't think we should totally rule that one out, because I do think that there is some opportunity there, and I really don't think there would be a ton of operations that would be going on at nighttime. And just talking to some of the tenants there, they've kind of agreed the same thing. I mean, most of them aren't out flying at 2 a.m., but if they're trying to come back from a trip, maybe they're coming back outside of those times, and they'd like to actually come back to their hangar versus have to stop somewhere else and then hop back over. So I wanted to speak to what Lisa had mentioned as far as fundraising. I don't know all the politics and allowability behind that. I know with the ARC one, it's because they're a nonprofit, so you can do a fundraiser type activity. I don't know if you would be able to do some sort of fundraiser activity to raise funds to do something at the Airpark without there being some sort of nonprofit tied to the Airpark, and I don't know if you know more about that.
I don't, and I suspect that we wouldn't be able to accept those type of funds because of the entity we are. But, you know, that's always something that if someone came to us with a proposal and said, oh, but we've identified the fact that we could establish, you know, Friends of Clearwater Airpark, I don't know.
Yeah.
But ultimately,
Well,
yeah.
that's what they did in Arcadia, so they had like a
Yeah.
Friends of Arcadia, and they raised a lot of the money to make some of the improvements down there. So I don't know, maybe your grants person can
Yeah.
find out if that is something that's doable as an option. And I wanted to speak to, if you could just mention about as far as filling the board position, just so it's on the record here, where we're at with that.
Yep, so I sent something over to the clerk's office that we had the vacancy, and then clerk's office, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, moves that along to council for that position.
So is that as far as like advertising it, or just, do we have an applicant that you're moving forward?
I've not received any information on an applicant, or no one suggested anyone to me at this juncture. Certainly that would be something we'd bring to the attention of council, or at times council will bring that to our attention.
And I wanted to be clear on that, so since you guys have shared the past ordinances with me and I've read those, it does seem that if someone is interested, they don't necessarily have to wait for an advertisement. They can submit their interest and an application for it, and they're kind of just held on file until a position would open, so.
Yeah, I think they have a list. Like I said, I might be speaking out of place, and Nicole might be able to clear that up.
The city keeps a cache of applicants for all boards,
Yeah.
and when the opportunities come up, they can pull them out.
I'll make just questioning about, I noticed when the VASIs, or the FAPIs, or whatever they are, get serviced, there's a guy with a U.S. government plate, so I guess it's considered a navigation aid, that sort of thing. So are there possibilities for certain federal things, like my bugaboo is the rotating beacon, which I'd love to have at night, which is a good navigation beacon. Maybe we could get modest federal funding for things like that are navigation based. I don't know. I don't know enough about how that works. But I just thought I'd bring it up. But I will vote not to raise rents too much, because I think I've
I would agree.
paid a lot already. So
Does the FAA even fund C-class airports? Do they support them?
So FAA provides a broad level of funding.
Okay.
You know, we spoke specifically to our situation, but, you know, the grant assurances are relatively common to any of those grant-funded transactions.
Would the fact that we are the highest airport and a FEMA assisting facility give us any special in with the FAA?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, I think when I look at government regulation and bureaucracy associated with this type of grants, it's pretty cut and dry, and if it's not specified therein, I don't think anyone can give you a wink and a nod and say, hey, we'll take care of you.
You get a trailer for the staff.
Yeah.
Okay, so my other one was, just to get it onto the record as well, as far as, I guess, I'm not sure what point in the negotiations would it be open back up for the neighborhoods and tenants to come and comment on the final
So that would,
negotiation lease?
so if we're able to come to terms, then that would come back before council. So any type of contract like that, lease agreements of those terms come before council. So that would be the opportunity for the public to come out and speak to that lease.
Okay, so like when it's the final lease and the council's gonna make a decision whether
Right.
they'd wanna go forward with it or not. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there would be time again for people to come and comment. And my last thing was, I'm disappointed that we didn't have the city sustainability presentation this meeting, so I wanted to know if you've heard if we can hopefully have it at the next meeting.
Sure. So the sustainability coordinator, she's been on leave, and her staff is trying to fulfill the request. We met a month ago to kind of discuss how Greenprint would intersect with Airpark operations. So they were working on it. She just returned to the office. I spoke with her yesterday. She's going to have something for you well ahead of our next meeting, and she will personally do the presentation.
Okay.
Good baby.
So,
She had a baby?
Yeah. I wasn't gonna make that a big public deal, but yes, yes, Jordan,
Well, everybody else was cheering for her, so,
so she's back.
yeah, great.
Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
No.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And so next will be if we have any items from the board members that you have
I have nothing to add.
outside of this. Okay, well, I have something for that too. I asked Eric to share with me some of the history of just the Airpark and the future, or previous Airpark Authority, now Airpark Board, the ordinances that kind of talked about the different duties that were asked of the authority previously and now of the board. And it still seems like there's some wiggle room in there for us as the board to do things like, besides the initiate studies, but we can, talk about additional improvements or maintenance that we would like to see done or that we're hearing from tenants that's needed, talking about any other matters that are relating to the Airpark that, the board has heard about and thinks needs to be brought up to the city. So I think that we are still in the right to do things like that as a quote-unquote board now versus an authority, and I don't think we've really done very much of that in the past, so I'd like to see us start doing more of that, and with Bruce, with you being there at the Airpark and having neighborhood representative, that if you are hearing more things from, the neighborhoods that they specifically want to see the board talk about and, address with the city council, I'd like to see us start being a little bit more active.
That's why I brought the landings thing up.
Yeah.
Because,
Oh, that's a good idea.
So I can have Eric, if you could send out all those previous ordinances, and I made a little summary of like the history timeline that I can send you, and if you could send that out to the board just for everybody to kind of see an idea of, some different things that maybe we want to look at in the future so we can be more proactive about things versus reactive, because we all know how long it takes to get things accomplished, so.
We did the transition from a authority to the advisory board. When did that occur?
Let's see, 2002, so almost 20 years ago, the name officially changed from authority to board. Although the responsibilities of the board were still pretty similar as the authority, they just were a little more general at this point, and I've heard we don't have like as much say as what we used to as the authority. I'm still not quite clear on what that really means as far as what we could and couldn't go up to the city council with, because I know some council members have asked, well, do you guys have anything you want to work on or bring up to us? And we haven't really, because I kind of thought we were waiting for them to tell us something to do. So, so I think it'd be nice if we can know how to be proactive and at least bring stuff up to them. And
We probably have a lot more of authorization to pursue things than we have.
well, and that's what I think. I think we might, and at least just go ahead and try that. So my goal is, especially as working with a new FBO lease negotiation, or if it even stays with Mr. King over there, I'd like to work more hand in hand with whoever the new FBO holder is. What?
Well, there's
Don't
a,
give me a hurry. I know your number. I'll be calling you if I have to. But I mean, we've had conversations too about just different items that, just making the board more aware of things on a more timely basis that we're able to work with and bring those things to the council versus kind of sitting and waiting for them to tell us something to do. So,
That's good.
well, there's a bit of a firewall there too, because as the lessees, then we can't do things that would be difficult for them to achieve under their lease terms.
well, I just
In the
mean,
past, when it was an enterprise that the city owned and operated, we could do that.
well, I still think we can like keep a record of different things that we're hearing about or
Oh, yeah.
that we think, whatever, if you're noticing some sort of maintenance that needs to be done
Yep.
on your hangar, like just kind of keeping a record
Or
of
an
all of
operating
that.
practice that could be improved or something like
Yeah, because I still have concerns listening to all of the conversations we've heard from city council that they haven't seemed to have been aware of what's been going on there all of this time and some of the maintenance needs that are there. So I'm hoping we can just change that and be a little bit more proactive with keeping them up to date on what all is going on there.
I think, the conduit to them many times is our minutes. So, it's either the recorded meeting or it's the minutes that are presented to council where they have access to what takes place in not only this board, but the others. So I think, the fact that we do operate the Airpark with a lease agreement, that there is that degree of separation that makes, and even council, the mandate is such that they're not involved in operations, right? So I think there's that degree of separation for a reason, but that's not to say that you couldn't establish a consensus and say that it's been brought to our attention that this structure is in need of serious repair, and by way of consensus that's recorded in the minutes, you say the Airpark Advisory Board believes that this item needs to be addressed now.
You wordsmithed it better for me, but that's what I was getting at, like working more closely with the FBO leaseholder to hear the things that they're seeing and being able to work hand in hand as the board to be able to hear what they're telling us and, bring that up to the council as well as what they may be bringing up to them. But basically, they're hearing it from two sides. The FBO leaseholder and the advisory board is in support of what they are requesting as well. And hopefully that would help with getting some things addressed on a more timely basis. That was all I had, so.
Okay, I have a question for David that I forgot to bring up earlier.
And here I was trying to sit back here and be really quiet.
You're doing good.
I was.
Yeah.
I do.
No, I have heard that there is a charter company working at PIE that will handle turboprops and small jets, that they're working to establish a base there. No?
I would think there's more than one. I mean, there's Signature or Raytheon or some of those people. They've been there forever. I don't know about any new company.
I just heard that there was possibly a newcomer coming in, so I just wondered.
Coming to Clearwater?
To PIE, yeah, to Clearwater International.
To Clearwater Airpark or PIE?
PIE. Yeah, no.
I have not heard.
Okay.
Have you, Barb?
If anybody knows,
We
you
have not
guys
heard.
would. Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, did anybody have anything else? Well, we have reached the end of our agenda on another timely meeting, so I'm just gonna call. Oh, wait.
I may have some information useful to one of the things you're trying to accomplish.
All right, come on up. We're way ahead of time, so I'll allow it.
Bob Gibson, 2374 Wind Gap Place, Clearwater. I've had a plane based at Clearwater Airpark since 1991. Someone, and I lost track of who, was asking about putting together some sort of a document that might make Clearwater Airpark a little more visible and understandable for neighbors and so forth. Sometime around 2014 or 15, I worked with a Heather Parsons at City, and she drafted out an 8.5 by 11 double-sided trifold document that talked about Clearwater Airpark. There was a paragraph in there that spoke about its origins in 1939. There was a little bit of statistics in there about the typical number of aircraft on the field, the number of operations per year. And one of the punchlines on the very back near the end was the fact that it was self-funded. It didn't take Clearwater taxpayer money to run it, which I think is a really important thing for our taxpayers to understand. I'm sorry I can't share a copy of it with you, but I think the time frame for this was around 2014, which was about the time that Clearwater Airpark was awarded the the Florida FDOT award for the most improved general aviation airport of the year.
We do have those.
Okay.
We're temporarily out,
Okay.
and we'll work with Mike to get some new ones printed, but we have them.
Great.
Okay, awesome.
Very
Thanks,
good.
Bob.
Thank you.
Didn't misremember that. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So I'm wondering if there's a way to get it better out to the neighborhoods, because we were just talking about, not everybody goes into the Airpark, kind of just drives by, waits to go in another time. So I don't know if that's like a mailer that we could send
Well, I
out.
mean, we have it so you can access those materials on our site. So I think it's two different conversations. You know, that's more of a kind of a historical document. I think this, with the item or the conversation had more to do with what's going on now and kind of keeping a newsletter, if you will. I'm in the process of establishing one for the marinas. It's not without the realm of possibility to do one for the Airpark, but my brain is devoid of content right now. So it's not, I have to have staff to be able to produce that. And I'm working with Public Communications now on a potential newsletter quarterly or so for the marinas. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility, but it's just not something that we've had the time to pursue. Because I think, educating everyone is critically important to all facets. The problem is, during these active negotiations, there's not a lot I can divulge.
Yeah.
So, I think that therein becomes the challenge. And is that a mandate we ask of the FBO? Send out a monthly mailer, or should we have that on our website? And to George's point, I just had a presentation last night at the Citizens Academy from Public Communications. They talked about the number of people that actually get the utility bill mailed versus the ones that are doing it online. And the comment was that they're losing opportunity to communicate with people because everyone's getting it online now.
Since this meeting is a little bit more informal than city council, and you let him speak even though it wasn't public comments period, I wanted to speak to what he was speaking about. What other organizations, and I'm thinking Moccasin Lake and the library, they have like Friends of Moccasin Lake, Friends of the Clearwater Library, and again, I don't know how involved I want to be, but there could be a nonprofit form called Friends of Clearwater Airpark. And I'm surprised we haven't done that. I honestly thought there was already some sort of a nonprofit that was already, working with the Clearwater Airpark. So that would be the way to bring in grants, fundraisers, it's being done everywhere, all over the city. So thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So yeah, that's what we were talking about. So I don't know if maybe you can ask the grants person if they can put together some information for us about like what all would be involved in that, and if you could use that as some sort of money donation way if they're a nonprofit to be able to make some improvements at the Airpark that other money may not be available for very timely. So.
Yeah, like I said, we are looking at that position to have an overarching conversation about funding potential for the Airpark, grant funding opportunities. So, that's not a tough question for me to ask when we have that conversation.
Yeah. All right, does anybody have anything else?
No.
No? All right, so I'm really going to adjourn the meeting. Meeting is adjourned.